construction company, I believe. I'd like to give you that information on notice if I could in the interest of time. Senator.
Is already being parked on that particular piece of ground.
Understood, Senator.
Which brings me, I guess, to the point of MOS 139, whilst it's around airfield design in particular, the point you've raised about intrusions into airspace, is that for the benefit of the building or is that for the benefit of keeping the aeroplane safe?
Oh, our focus is on the keeping aircraft safe, Senator.
Okay. So could you just describe for me the different classifications of airfield in Australia and CASA's responsibility in terms of safety at each of those different classifications?
Yes, our classifications generally are either registered or certified, but I will ask Mr McGregor, who is our Acting Executive Manager of Airspace and Aerodrome Regulation Division, to perhaps enlighten you a little bit more.
Senator Malcolm McGregor, Acting Executive Manager for Airspace and Aerodrome Regulation and CASA.
Thank you. Did you hear the question?
Could I just have that again, please, Senator?
I asked for a definition of the different categories of aerodromes and CASA's responsibility for operations at each of those aerodromes.
Basically, there are two categories of regulated, which are regulated, and that is certified and registered aerodromes. And CASA has an oversight audit program that deals with both.
And beyond that?
And beyond that, that's basically the areas of regulation of certified and registered aerodromes.
Okay, under MOS 139, it highlights that if you are operating an airfield that is not certified or registered, but you have air transport operations, and particularly aircraft that have 9 or more seats, then there are actually CASA oversight requirements on that. Do you think that's appropriate, given it's not a licensed or registered airfield?
I must say, Senator, I'm just answering in terms of the regulation of the aerodromes, and
this is part of the regulation of the aerodromes. It's in your manual.
Yep.
Yes, indeed. There are approximately 134 registered aerodromes. There's approximately 188 registered aerodromes. If there are RPT operations to an aerodrome that is not registered or certified, and I don't know at this stage whether there are, as you say, at 9 seats or above, then that would be surveilled under the approval of that air operator certificate for the operator who is operating into that airfield. 139, of course, does have requirements on the operator of the airfield, particularly in relation to runway widths, and those two items are somewhat separate.
Okay. Would you accept the fact that that's an application of the James Reason model of safety? Are you familiar with the James Reason model?
Yes, I am, Senator.
That it is another element of safety, and that while you predominantly regulate the aircraft and the aircrew, that the environment they operate in is also an important part of safety?
Oh, most definitely so, Senator, and everything that hangs off that, whether it be from baggage services through to air traffic control services. What we're trying to do is look over the whole organisation under the various heads of power that we have, or not the organisation, over the industry under various heads of power. Certain parts of the industry require more oversight than others.
Sure.
But we do have that ability, and we are looking at the industry as a whole, holistically.
So would you regulate, I recognise that RAA aircraft, albeit it's at an arm's length, you have a very distant oversight of, but for general aviation, you have a direct responsibility for oversighting general aviation safety?
That's correct, Senator.
So regardless of where an operator chooses to fly an aircraft, you would have a responsibility for having oversight of the safety of that aircraft and the operation?
When it comes to a broad statement, the answer is yes. When it comes to general aviation, private operations of a person in their own aircraft, operating from their own airfield, say that's on their own property, we tend not to have an area that we delve into in that respect. But our general view is yes, we do. And some years ago, in 2009 into 10, we converted, as you're most probably aware, the GAP airfields into Class D airspace on the basis so that we could have better oversight and better safety protection for the GA operators who predominantly use those airfields.
So if a GA operator is operating at an airfield and the owner of the airfield, who's not the operator, so it's not a private airfield, elects to build, for example, a water storage dam or reservoir right next to the runway, which attracts birds, would that be considered a safety issue?
We certainly would look at that, Senator, yes.
Where that has occurred, have you looked at that?
You'd have to give me a specific example, Senator. I
Casino?
don't know of any. Sorry?
Casino?
Casino? Unless Mr McGregor has any specific information on casino, I'll have to take that on notice.
The question in part is what mechanism is in place, given your previous answers to this committee, that an ALOP aerodrome, if it's not registered or certified, you essentially are hands off. What mechanism is in place for you to be able to have that influence and, as you put it, that head of power to intervene and, if needs be, direct the airport operator to rectify a dangerous situation? Or is it incumbent on the operator to then curtail his operations to remain safe in accordance with CASA's expectations?
Yeah, I think that the answer is, Senator, and there are a couple of examples of this where we've had non-precision approaches, GPS-type approaches into airfields which were not certified or registered, where we run into this conflict. And that's one of the reasons why we have maintained the oversight of the certified and registered airfields and require that as a minimum for someone who is going to have an instrument approach to their airfield. We're very cognisant as well, though, that all regulation carries a cost and carries a burden, and particularly on the general aviation sector, we're trying to get the maximum amount of safety oversight that we can without unnecessarily burdening them with economic cost. That necessarily means that we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach to every airfield that is not certified or not registered.
Okay, my question though is what framework is in place to enable, if an operator is concerned with something, one of those slices of Swiss cheese in the James Reason model that is impacting his safety, what avenue do they have to come to you as the regulator and to have you enforce, from the government's perspective, the intent statement of the White Paper of Aviation, the NASAG intent statement, the terms of the lease or the deed that transferred ownership of airfields to local government?
Well, some of those matters, of course, are in government policy and rightly fit with the department, such as the NASAG and those other issues you raise on the airfield operation, or who owns the airfield, etc. Off-airfield development is a similar thing, which again, CASA has a limited role to play. Whether we should have a larger role or not is not a question for me to decide, but in far as our available powers go, there are numerous heads of power where people can come to us directly, write to us, emails, whatever, and we will take the issue on its face value.
So what I'm hearing there is that there are examples where there is a legitimate safety concern that you don't currently have a head of power that will enable you to act.
I don't think that's correct, Senator. I think we do have adequate heads of power, except for the off-airfield development. We do have a Section 92 where we can give directions to airfield operators, and that is not restricted to certified and registered aerodromes.
Okay, so potentially you could get rid of a body of water that was attracting birds, but you may not be able to affect the situation in Victoria where there's somebody just off airfield who's planted trees deliberately at the end of the runway to encumber aircraft operations and require the runway to get shorter and shorter.
I think that's fair to say, Senator, yes.
Okay. Chair, I'll come back for some questions in a minute.
Thanks, Senator Fawcett.